What's up guys, Brian Kelly here from Zombie Guitar. Here in today's video I just want to give you the objective truth about the CAGED system yet again. I've been doing this for many years and I'm going to continue to do it for many years to come, but I want to do this video because I want to have a link to give to people that takes into account the shortened attention spans. So a lot of my other videos you kind of have to watch them and then after like 10-15 minutes you're like, oh okay, I see what's happening. Not many people are going to do that though, so let's get right into it. So this image right here is not correct. The final column, the fourth column, is really the problem. That is only going to be correct 1/3 of the time if you're lucky, and it's going to be incorrect 2/3 of the time if you're lucky. It's probably going to be incorrect more than 2/3 of the time, but if you're lucky, 2/3 of the time it's going to be incorrect. The first column, great. The second column, great. The third column, it could go either way. The fourth column, incorrect 2/3 of the time if you're lucky. Let's talk about why that is the case. All right, so these are all going to be D major chords. There's no fret numbers labeled here, so we can just assume that the top image, the one that shows the C shape, we can just assume that that's the nut right here, which would mean that this chord shape right here is landing right between frets 2 and 5, all right? So that's a D major chord in the C shape. That is great. And by the way, in case you don't know what the CAGED system is, it's just a way to label chord shapes. Like if I have an E flat chord in a shape, I'll be like, oh, what shape is that? Oh, that's the C shape that E flat chord is being played in. Oh, what's that B flat chord that guy over there is playing? Oh, it looks like he's playing that in the D shape. All right, so these are just ways to label shapes. We have 5 shapes. We have a C shape, we have an A shape, we have a G shape, we have an E shape, and we have a D shape. You have shapes. Those are just labels for the ways that chords can be played. So I'm going to take a D chord. You've probably seen a D chord like this. But I'm going to play that D chord in the C shape. That's how the CAGED system works, right? So here's a D chord or a D major chord in the C shape. So when I play it like this is a D major chord in the C shape. It's the same thing. There's more than one way to play a D chord. Like here's a D chord, here's a D chord, here's a D chord, here's a D chord, here's a D chord. There's a bunch of different ways, and all those different shapes have labels. That's what the CAGED system is for. It's just like, oh, that shape is called that. Oh, that shape is called that. That's all it's about. So that's all well and good. First column, great. Second column, that's just letting you know where the additional chord tones are for the chord in question. The second column is 100% correct. So anytime you have a chord in the C shape, you're always going to have your 1 here, your 3 here, your 5, your 1, and your 3. That's your C shape. Anytime you have a C shape, you always know that you're going to have an additional 5 up here. You're going to have an additional 5 down here. And you're going to have a 3 down here. A major chord consists of a 1, 3, and a 5. That's the intervals that make up a major chord. So that's all great. That's where all your 1s, 3s, and 5s are surrounding a chord played in the C shape. Couldn't agree more. Third column. The third column is now telling you, okay, every time you have a chord in the C shape, in this example we have a D major chord in the C shape, it's telling you anytime you have any chord in the C shape, you always got to play this pentatonic pattern. That's cool, That's a good connection to make, right? All right. That's where things get a little iffy, and I'm actually going to come back to this. So that's not I'm not going to say that's incorrect. It's not incorrect. The third column is like, it's not ideal, always. Sometimes it may be ideal, sometimes it may not be ideal. It's really, you have to know the context of where the chord's being used to know if that pentatonic scale pattern is ideal or not. But it's always going to be the correct, it's always going to give you, you're not going to be hitting out of key notes by doing that, all right? So that's why I say that's iffy, all right? The third one could go either way. Anyway, the fourth column. The fourth column is where things are 2/3 of the time going to be completely incorrect. 1/3 of the time, you're good to go. 2/3 of the time, it's not correct. All right, so I have a D major chord in the C shape. So this fourth column here is saying anytime you have a chord played in the C shape, this is going to be the scale pattern that surrounds it. All right, so let's try it. Here's a D major chord in the C shape. Here's the surrounding scale pattern. Sounds pretty good, right? It sounds perfect. Like, why would that possibly be wrong? Why wouldn't people want to make that connection? And that's why I'm here. Why would you not want to make that connection? Well, I mean, you would, but you have to make the connection at the right time. That assumes that D major chord is being used in the key of D major. If you happen to be using a D major chord in the key of D major, then yes, that would be the right scale pattern. Let's say our chord progression goes something like this. So that was a chord progression in the key of D major. This chord shape is great. This scale pattern is great. All right, all great. I'm in the key of D major. Things get, they change when you're in a different key. Let's say I'm now in the key of G major. Different key, completely different key. I'm in the key of G major. All right, here's my new chord progression. All right, I'm in the key of G major now. There was still a D major chord in that chord progression. It's just not in the key of D major anymore. I'm now in a new key. I can still use this shape if I want to. When the D major chord occurs, I can still go. Yeah. Alright, so you get the idea. You can still use that chord shape there. But the surrounding scale pattern is no longer going to be the D major scale, because I'm not using a D major scale to solo in the key of G major that you're going to be hitting sour notes. The surrounding scale pattern is now this. Alright, so you can still play this D major chord like that, but the surrounding scale notes are going to be that of the G major scale. So it's a different set of surrounding scale notes. You could also find a D major chord in the key of A major. So if you're in the key of A major, let's say the chord progression is this. All right, so you could be in that chord progression too, or you could be in that key, the key of A, which also had a D major chord as one of the chords. If I wanted to, I could use this funky shape for that progression too, if I want. But the surrounding scale pattern that encapsulates this D major chord is going to be the A major scale. Why is it going to be the A major scale? Because I'm in the key of A major. So this chord progression. Now it's the A major scale that surrounds this shape. In all three examples, in the key of D major, in the key of G major, in the key of A major, this remained constant. The D major chord was present in all three examples. The D major chord can be played in the C shape. The surrounding scale pattern was correct 1/3 of the time. The surrounding scale pattern was correct when we looked at the D major example. It was not correct when we looked at this G major example or the A major example. That is why I always say that caged chord shapes do not give you scale patterns. The context that the chord is being used in, within the key, that's what gives you the scale patterns. All right, that is super important. Let's go back to the third column real quick. I just want to talk about that before ending this video. The pentatonic scale. The pentatonic scale is a 5-note scale. These other scales that I'm talking about, D major scale, G major scale, A major scale, all that stuff, those are the diatonic scales. Those are the 7-note scales. In any 7-note diatonic scale, you have 3 5-note pentatonic scales. You could also say that there's 6 5-note pentatonic scales. I just prefer to say 3 because it's really just 3 relative major minor pairs. To explain this concept, let me just talk about the key of C major. All right, this is a different key than we've been talking about all along. But the key of C major doesn't have any sharp notes or flat notes in it, so it's the easiest key to explain music theory concepts in. So if you look at the key of C major, which has the relative minor of A minor, it just has C, D, E, F, G, A, B. That's the 7-note diatonic scale. Within that 7-note diatonic scale, you have your C major pentatonic scale. That's a 5-note scale, which has the relative minor of the A minor pentatonic scale. It's the same 5 notes. So C major pentatonic scale, A minor pentatonic scale. As far as I'm concerned, it's the same scale, or it's the same 5-note scale. It's just easier for me to think of it that way. Yeah, intervals and all that stuff, the under the hood stuff is different, but just like the 5 notes of the C major scale, the 5 notes of the A minor pentatonic scale, exactly the same. So I'm just saying, okay, that's one of the 3 pentatonics. Another one of the 3 pentatonics that's in the key of C major / A minor is the G major / /E minor pentatonic scale. If you look at the 5 notes that make up the G major pentatonic scale or the 5 notes that make up the E minor pentatonic scale, both of which have the exact same 5 notes, I'm just calling that another one of the 3 pentatonics. If you look at those 5 notes, you're going to see all 5 of those notes are also part of this key of C major. There's no sharp notes, there's no flat notes, it's just white keys on the piano, so it's part of that 7-note diatonic scale. So that's 2 of them. The third one in this key is going to be the F major pentatonic, D minor pentatonic. That's the third. F major pentatonic, D minor pentatonic. It shares the same 5 notes as one another. I'm just saying that's the same. It's one of the 3 pentatonic scales. So in the key of C major, A minor, which is your 7-note diatonic scale, you have 3 pentatonic scales to choose from. If you play any of those 3 pentatonic scales, you're going to be hitting 100% correct notes. You're not going to be hitting any out-of-key notes, no sour notes. You know, different people have different definitions for what constitutes a sour note. But theoretically speaking, you're not going to be hitting any notes that are outside of the 7-note diatonic scale by choosing any of those 3 pentatonic scales. So going back to this image that we're talking about, the third column here where it says, oh, every time you have a chord in the C shape, you always play this pentatonic scale pattern. And it's cool, you know, and it's in, if you're in the key of D major, that will be the correct pentatonic scale pattern. If you're in the key of G major, that will still be the correct pentatonic scale pattern, but it might not be ideal. If you're in the key of A major, that will still be the correct pentatonic scale pattern, but again, it still may not be ideal. Me personally, the way that I like to, like if I'm playing the full 7-note diatonic scale, and then I'm like, you know what, I'm going to reduce my playing to just 5 pentatonic notes. The pentatonic scale that I usually choose 99.9% of the time is that of the key that I'm playing in. So if I'm playing the key of D major, and I'm like, I don't feel like using all 7 notes, I'm just going to use 5 of these notes. If I'm playing in the key of D major, I'm just going to play the D major pentatonic scale. Do I have other pentatonic scale options that I could use that would still keep me in key? Yes, absolutely. But I just find that the D major pentatonic scale works best when I'm in the key of D major. If I'm in the key of A major, then I'm going to play the A major pentatonic scale. If I'm in the key of G major, I'm going to play the G major pentatonic scale. If I'm in the key of C major, I'm going to play the C major pentatonic scale. Although there's other options, it's just I find that the main pentatonic, I'm going to call it, is the best of the 3, usually, right? But again, it comes down to context, you know? Sometimes I may be in the key of A major. I may be on a D major chord in the key of A major. And over that D major chord, I may be like, you know what, I want to play the D major pentatonic scale over that chord. That's cool. Or I may be like, you know what, over that D major chord, I want to just keep playing the A major pentatonic scale. I want to be able to make that call. I don't want to be locked into like, oh, every time I have a chord in this shape, this is the pentatonic pattern that must go with it 100% of the time, because that's not true. It's not the case. The scale patterns change, the chords change, but they don't change together. If a song is in a single key and it doesn't change keys at all and there's no borrowed chords, no out-of-key chords or anything like that, it's just one single key, like just one happy song that's in the key of D major, then your scale remains constant. Your D major scale spanned out across the fretboard remains constant, remains unchanged. The chords are changing, but your scale or framework for that key that you're playing in remains completely unchanged. All right? The chords are the things that are doing the changing. Each chord has a caged shape for it, depending on where you're at on the fretboard. All right? That's what gives you your chord tones for each of the chords. So the problem is a lot of the internet, and I keep saying this over and over, is focused on the layer 1, I call it, the layer 1. They're focused on mapping out the scale, mapping out the key scale. Everyone's like, oh, I'm in the key of D major. I got to map out the D major scale across the fretboard by using connecting scale patterns. Yes, you do. That's hard as hell to do. It's going to take you years. It takes, I don't know, a couple years for most people. It took me like 3 years maybe to really get it down where I could do it without really thinking too much. Connecting scale patterns together is really, really hard to do. And that's why everyone thinks that all these guitar theory concepts are about that. They're like, oh, modes must be about that. Oh, the CAGED system must be about that. Oh, everything that is talked about on the internet must be about that, because it's super hard to do. And it is hard to do. But unfortunately, the CAGED system is not about that. The CAGED system is not about connecting these scale patterns together so that you can play in a key. Yes, that's super hard to do, but you know what's even harder to do? What's even harder to do is to play in key and keep up with the chord changes, which are constantly changing. All these ever-changing CAGED shapes, these chord tones that are constantly changing as the chords do. That's even harder. So if you think it's hard to solo in a single key and connect scale patterns together, wait until you get to the next level, layer 2, where you not only have to solo in key, but you also have to keep up with the chord changes. That is what the CAGED system is for. That second thing, the second layer, the super, super, super hard stuff, that's what the CAGED system is for. But the reason it doesn't get talked about on the internet is because a lot of the population in the world is more on the beginner side of guitar playing. You know, most of the people that are looking at lessons on the internet, most of the people that are, you know, whatever, asking questions on the internet and stuff like that, they're still on the first layer, which is hard as hell. It's hard as hell to connect scale patterns together. It's not easy. All right. And they're they're trying to figure out how to do that. And they have about 9 million different sources on the internet being like, oh, that's what the CAGED system's for. And they're like, oh, okay, that's what the CAGED system's for. But it's not. The CAGED system is not for that. All right. Hopefully you can see how this massive misinformation overload happens, you know. But it's not, because connecting scale patterns is super, 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 super hard, and that's what everyone's trying to do. That's what like 90% of all guitar players are trying to do. So that's where all the chit chat is about. But then there's even harder stuff, which is only where, like, I don't know, I'm making these numbers up, but like 10% of the guitar playing population is at. 90% of the guitar population is trying to connect scale patterns together. The remaining 10% is beyond that, and they're trying to keep up with the chord changes, which is way, 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 way harder than connecting scale patterns together. Those additional 10% of people would benefit greatly from the CAGED system, because that's what the CAGED system is for. Those 90% of the people, that's not what the CAGED system is for at all. Okay? It's not about connecting scale patterns. If you try to use it to connect scale patterns, you're going to be right 1/3 of the time if you're lucky. And the reason I say if you're lucky, because that's just assuming everyone's playing in keys. Like everyone's playing in songs that just have one key. Like I'm in the key of D major. Yay, all of the chords are in the key of D major. Or I'm in the key of A major. Yay, all of the chords are in the key of A major. So easy, so fun. Things aren't always like that. Sometimes songs change keys. Sometimes songs use a whole bunch of out-of-key chords. Sometimes songs are so complicated, you look at it, you're like, I don't even know what key that's in. There's like 5 potential keys. Like songs get really, really complicated. Things are not always super easy where everything's just like, oh, it's just a handful of diatonic chords and we make a song out of it. It's not always like that. So in that case, you may be in the key of like B or something, and then you may find a D major chord thrown into the mix, right? So you're playing in the key of B. Your B major scale is your soloing framework, but then you come across that D major chord, you know, so now you're not in the key of A, you're not in the key of G, you're not in the key of D. You're like, well, what do I do? You can't just resort back to the scale pattern that you've been led to believe was the one by looking at this image, you know. You can't just be like, oh, I just played the D major scale. It's a D major chord, I played the D major scale. Give it a shot. Let me know how that works out for you. You're going to be hitting some sour notes. You're going to be hitting a lot of sour notes if you do that. So, yeah, so when you play that D major chord in the context of B major, you know, you're going to be like, I don't know what to use, you know. But the fact that you're in the key of B major, that can clue you in. You're going to be using the B major scale surrounding that D major chord. But then you're just going to be emphasizing the D major notes played over that D major chord, all right? Anyway, so the point is you need the context, all right? Just given the chord alone, you can play a chord in any of the CAGED shapes. But if you want the surrounding scale pattern information, you need the context. You need to know what key the chord is being used in. That context is not given to you through images like this. When you see an image like this, it leads beginner guitar players, which is 90% of the guitar playing population. It gives them the impression that every time you have a chord in the C shape, you always play this pentatonic scale pattern. Or anytime you have a chord in the C shape, you always play this diatonic scale pattern. But then in reality, you're gonna come across D major chords being used in all types of other contexts that are not just in the key of D major. All right? Therefore, those scale patterns no longer work. Therefore, this image should not be spread around the internet, in my opinion. I don't think it's helpful. That's just my opinion. But hey, there's like 8 billion people in the world and everyone has an opinion. So that's mine. Thanks for watching. See you next time.